Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's Wade Lightheart from Bioptimizers with another edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. And today we're going to talk about men's hormonal health, a real biohacking adventure, and how all of this idea came to a company called Hormone Health. And we have none other than Saad Alam, who is going to talk about his journey in the past decade. In fact, he experienced a health renaissance via a biohacking journey that has dramatically changed how he eats, works out, recovers, and leads one of the fastest growing men's health company in the United States, Hormone Health, which facilitates access to hormone testing, physician consultations, and treatments from the comfort of your own home. Saad, welcome to the show.
Welcome, Wade. I got to tell you, I am jealous of your ability to do that kind of introduction. I feel like if I could do that, my life would be a whole lot better.
Well, I've always been fascinated. We're off topic, but hey, well, let's go there. I've always been fascinated with ring announcers and those things, like the Michael Buffers and Bruce Buffers of the world, and how their melodic introductions. Let's get ready to rumble. I just, it's my podcast. Can I capture a little bit of that energy? Because I believe that if we can make our day-to-day life fun and we can add an element, a little bit of showmanship into, what really deserves that type of energy and insight. You're out there doing an incredible job with your company that's helping men across the world. I think that's more important than who's going to duke it out in the next UFC event. No disrespect. I love UFC. I love sports announcing, but more importantly, I love helping people get healthy. And so I'm excited to have you on the podcast today.
Well, listen, I can't tell you, I'm thrilled. I feel honored to be here, and I'm excited to have this conversation.
All right. So you have an history, I think, that we should unpack first before we get into this men's health issue, because first and foremost, there's a crisis going on. Let's not kid ourselves in men's health. Second thing, there's a renaissance going on in the world, which is biohacking. And third, there is biotech, which is an expanding field in human potential of extending life and giving us all sorts of data. And you kind of have a fusion history of all of these things wrapped in one, even though you're really young and you look amazing, obviously. You're a biohacker, a company, funder or developer, I guess, in a bunch of different areas. And more importantly, you have this super fast growing men's health company relative to solving one of the problems that we have today in the modern world for men. You want to talk about how you got started in this whole journey?
Yeah, absolutely, Wade. And thank you. I mean, what you just said just put goosebumps on my back. I feel like I'm going to have you announce me every time I go into the bedroom from now on. So you're right. Like, I have been incredibly lucky, and I feel grateful to kind of like chase after what was been my life's passion for so long. And I can give you a little bit of a background on myself. I can tell you how the problem started, how I started chasing after it. So basically, a little bit of background on myself, right? I've been obsessed with health my entire life. And frankly, a ton of it came from the fact that my parents were immigrants. I grew up here, and right, when you're a kid, all you want to do is fit in. And I didn't know how to until I learned how to play sports. And playing sports was the beginning of kind of like this path that gave me confidence. I played sports all through high school, through college. I mean, I still like to consider myself an athlete. I'm touching about 40 here, and I'm probably not as fast, and I probably don't move as sharp as I used to, but I try. I've worked, oh man, basketball was my sport out of all things. I played a ton of football too. I mean, anything where you're running, and probably even anything where you're jumping out of a plane or you're driving a car fast to give you adrenaline, like it's been on my list, right? Whatever I can do. And I think a lot of it is I like to see how far I can push myself. And so, I've worked out 6 days a week for the past 25 years of my life. I eat perfectly. I'm constantly researching diet, fitness protocols. I meditate twice a day. I track my sleep with 3 different devices. I do 40 vials of blood every 3 months to see literally like 28 pages worth of biomarkers, what they look like. And if there's a new fitness product out there, a new wellness product, I'm buying it, right? Just because I absolutely love the idea of being able to extend kind of our health span, right? And I think that you are a perfect example of someone that understands how the arc of our life is being redefined right now. And we have the potential to live until 110, 120, 130, whatever it may be. And so the question is, how can you push yourself? And when I turned 35, just sold my first company, and the couple things started happening to me that were really weird, right? I was in really good health, although I was working absolutely crazy hours, which I continue to do. But all of a sudden, my mental acuity and my stamina started to slip. So I was having trouble kind of recalling very simple linear concepts. And frankly, like I started to be sad at certain times, which in my entire life has never been something I've had to deal with. Second thing, body composition started to change dramatically, started to put quite a bit of weight around my midsection, which just wasn't my body type my entire life. And then all of a sudden, libido, right, gone. And I don't mean like sort of kind of gone. I mean like plumbing is not working, which, as you can imagine, makes for some incredibly awkward conversations between me and my girl. Cliche kind of conversations where it's not you, it's me kind of deal. And
all the male rationalizations that have to be implemented as defense mechanisms because there's something going on internalized. And I think it's hard for guys to come to talk about those things or deal with those things, or even to recognize, let alone to develop a strategy around.
You know what? You hit the nail on the head, right? And let's even talk about that quickly.
Mm-hmm.
The psychological problems that result from all of the changes are actually far worse than the physical changes itself, because all of a sudden you are questioning yourself and your identity as a man. And so much of our identity is wrapped up in, can we provide for our families and the people we love? I'm thinking, will I be able to take care of my aging parents? Will I be able to take care of my girl? Will I be able to be a role model to my brother? Did I just build my last company? Like, all those things were in my head, and they don't just hit you once, right? As the guy, they start, and it becomes like this self-defeating negative feedback loop where you just question and question and question. And to be frank, like, it really messes with you. And as guys, the other thing we're really bad at too is we're really bad at saying something's wrong.
Yeah.
Right?
Hey, like, I'm good. Yeah, I lost an arm back there, but I'm good. Yeah. Can't remember anything. I'm good. Ready to go.
Yeah. No, it's like, and like, I think the thing that's interesting is like, so many of men go through the same problem that I went through, and they quite literally for 5 or 10 years or 15 years, they don't say anything until it's at a point where it's so bad. And right, the psychological trauma that has, the physical trauma, and they just resign themselves to thinking, it's okay. It's kind of like what happens when you get to 35 or 40. This is just old age. And I think what people don't realize is like, no, it doesn't have to be like that at all. And so many of, I guess I'm blessed that so many of the people I get to meet on a daily basis, 60, 70, 80 years old, look like they're 30 or 45. And so much of it is mentally, they have thought they're young for all this time, and they've been taking care of themselves, right? And so you realize it's 100% possible. And so that's kind of what really, I went to my doctor, right? And I said, hey, look, something's dramatically wrong with me. He said, let me take your blood, takes my blood, come back a couple weeks later. And he sits me down and like really seriously looks at me in the eyes. And he says, Saad, it's in your head. And I said, are you crazy? One, you couldn't have called me over the phone to tell me that. And two, you're going to come in here and tell me it's in my head. I said, that's just not an acceptable answer. Like, I've got to, I said, let me see the blood. And, you know, he basically took a look at my hormone levels, and he says, well, look, you're in the reference range for all these things. I said, yeah, but I'm telling you, like, these reference ranges, they feel like they're pretty off. And so that's what began this journey of me seeing, I probably saw 11 different specialists over the course of 6 months. And I finally met a group of physicians that are really like hormone optimization and regenerative physicians. And I hadn't probably spent a ton of time with physicians up until that point in my life, because I'd just been super healthy. I'd been trying to figure out what's the coolest way to meditate. And They basically looked at the blood work and they said, Saad, you had the testosterone level of an 80-year-old man. And I said, that sounds horrible. And they said, it's actually not that big of a deal. Like the large majority of our patients now are actually pretty young guys like you coming in for the same problem. And I think the initial reaction too is like, oh, testosterone, the T word, it's like dirty underbelly, kind of like late night infomercial kind of stuff. And they were like, look, it's actually like pretty common that at the age of 30, your body starts losing its natural ability to produce 1 to 2 percentage points of testosterone per year. And they said there's also there's a very large kind of like global, what we'll call it, silent pandemic going on, where men are beginning to lose more testosterone than the previous generation. And when you dive into it, it almost feels conspiratorial, right? And what I mean by it is our father's generation in comparison to us had 26% more testosterone and 50% more sperm. And then when you start looking at the reasons why, the scientific community is actually kind of galvanizing around the fact that they're what they call, some people call them EDCs, endocrine disrupting chemicals. Some people call them plastics. Some people call them PCBs, right? Depending upon who you're speaking to, there's a different way to categorize them. But at the end of the day, they are these estrogenic compounds that get into your body and they tell the natural or the hormone regulating centers in our brain to stop endogenous production. And so now you have these guys that have lower testosterone levels that are also passing them epigenetically on to another generation. And so you also start looking at like 40% of men over 35 have this problem. And I'm sitting there going like, this just doesn't seem real. Like we just had a conversation, Wade, about another thing in Canada that doesn't seem real. I felt the same exact way. And so that's kind of like really inspired me to say, is this a problem that's worth kind of like dedicating my life to? And I went on optimization therapy and it quite literally fundamentally changed my life, right? I went from feeling like I couldn't get out of bed certain days to feeling like my 25-year-old self. And I don't mean the ability to pick up cars or having superhuman strength. I mean, just feeling like my best self on the best day ever. And the moment that happens, it creates this momentum in your life. And all of a sudden you're starting to go, my God, I can dream again. I feel a little bit more confident. And you're saying to yourself, I know exactly what it is I want to do. And for me, it was build a company that helped men have confidence as they age. And we've been really lucky and fortunate that it worked out well so far, knock on wood.
There's a few things that I think in that story that I think is really important to address to the males in our audience that might be listening to that. And I think it goes back to the 1990s when all of the information came out about the use of anabolic agents in sports, which shattered a lot of people's visions, whether that was, the Bash brothers for the Oakland A's, whether it was in the late 80s, the Ben Johnson testing positive in the Olympics, and then subsequently virtually every person that was in that race when they back tested, all were on that. And so I remember Linford Christie saying, I wish all of these golden halos of all the athletes would fell down. And then kind of emerging into the various doping aspects, the Icarus stuff. And then of course, maybe the most popular negative association was the Lance Armstrong of most history. And doping has been something that's been going on, and yet men who are dominant in sports are often associated with hypermasculinity. They're associated with products. They're associated with all these things. And it's kind of in the culture of men to recognize the quote unquote iconic alpha male, which every man kind of identifies at least on a subconscious level and rates himself against that. And men have their own competency hierarchies, which kind of go by those. And that could be, academic achievement. But in the world of sports, which is so predominant in American culture for certain, we now have this association that if you use exogenous testosterone or testosterone derivatives, which are anabolic agents, or anything in that nature, somehow you're dirty, you're cheating, you're not ethical, you're not being an honest male, you are subverting something. And if you don't go down that route, you're not a competitive person either. Now you can't compete at the highest level. So it's kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't component, because you go, yeah, that's what those guys are doing. And this is what the alpha males are kind of doing. We kind of know that when we see the WWF stars or we see the UFC stars, but we're not going to do that. But that means I've got an out that I don't have that competitive advantage, because we do know cognitive behavior, memory, mood, identification with this. And the female industry has hyper accentuated the beauty aspects of, face symmetry and estrogenic qualities of youth and skin and all that sort of stuff. And it's very well understood in the female market. And that has its own series of pressures. But nobody talks about this in men, and what I call it, the silent suffering of men, because to admit that you're not that alpha male gorilla makes you feel like somehow I'm less than. And if I go get help, that help could be construed as I'm not ethical. How did you resolve that particular dilemma? Because I think men, and I've got lots of men in the middle age category, and I've not used testosterone replacement therapy as of yet. It's kind of a tool in the toolbox I'm kicking down the road. But I have almost all of the biohacker friends I have are on testosterone replacement. A great number of the 30-year-old men that I know in the tech world specifically are on TRT. And there's differences between TRT and steroid. We can maybe get into that, or testosterone, like for sports enhancement versus replacement. How did you navigate this? What was the emotional, psychological process that you had to go through to get to the point, to get to that doctor's office, or and then the subsequent, what did you say, 11 different medical
doctors and specialists?
What was going on for you in that point? Because I think this is the part that men have got to get a grip around.
Do you remember the last time someone broke up with you?
I do.
How did it feel?
It's a great question. I think there's a numbness at first. So there's what I would call a surface of acceptance with indignation. Fine, that's the way it's going to be. Fair enough. We're hitting this right now. Cut the arm off. See you later. So there's the out-facing masculine response. I'm not going to flinch in the face of chaos. And then afterwards, there's an unpacking of the psychological and emotional components that are processed out over months. And that can be accelerated or extended depending on who you reach out to, what tools you have in the toolbox, and how quickly that you're able to do that. And so I think that's an important journey for people. But with the proliferation of information today and technology and people and expertise, I think extended suffering, which is beyond the reflection point. I think you always, when there's a challenge, you want a reflection point. It's like, okay, I was listening to Eric Weinstein talk about this the other day. It's like, there's an evolutionary response, is that when something goes wrong, we dwell on that so that we might be able to learn a lesson. And that's a value of what's made humans evolve so quickly over other species. However, there's a point where you've got to move on, and dwelling too long. And what is that sweet spot? I think in the world of TRT, I think that sweet spot is starting to compress. I think it's been drawn out, like you said, 10, 15 years for a lot of guys. And we got to turn that down to maybe 10 or 15 weeks.
So one, I agree with you. It's got to be a faster level of introspection of men to basically say like, hey, I want some help. I actually think we're at a turning point right now where men will basically say, this is pretty common stuff. I'm just going to go get my third of the life tune up or whatever it may be, because my body's changing, and they'll be okay with it. And so I'll tell you, for me, the way I got around it emotionally was and I'll be very honest, right? You know, my doctor didn't believe something was wrong with me because I was in such great shape. And I was like, man, I'm just always sad. And I felt heartbroken, right? I tried ED medications because I had problems in that department. He wanted to put me on antidepressants. Frankly, I wasn't going to touch an antidepressant. I used to market them at a pharmaceutical company, and God bless them for certain people, but that wasn't the path that I wanted to go down. I was sleeping great. Like I was optimizing all the other things that should have given me the kind of satisfaction in my life that I deserved. I had a wonderful girlfriend. My family's super supportive, and I just felt sad all the time. And so for me, it wasn't a question of who am I going to go ask, because the option was quite literally becoming a shell of myself. And I could see it. I was living in it every single day. And excuse my language, I was like, no, this is not going to fucking happen to me. I'm not going to let this happen to me. And it was like, I intend to get so much more out of life because I just absolutely enjoy it. And my parents have given me so much in life. My family has been so supportive. How would it be if I couldn't be there for them? And honestly, that's been my role. And the oldest son in the family. My parents are starting to like legitimately get old now, right? And like, one of the greatest joys of my life is to be able to take care of them, as well as take care of, you know, all of the other things in my family. It's just, I get so much excitement from it. You're going to tell me you're going to take that away from me? You're going to tell me I can't build a company again based upon something I'm in love with? Absolutely not. And so for me, you're right. I was I was overly proactive, and it didn't happen all of a sudden. It happened gradually, but then all of a sudden it was so bad that I said, I have to act on it.
What was the trigger? What was the trigger that took you from, hey, this is kind of a descending level that I think I can fight my way through this somehow, or I'm going to have a breakthrough, to like, you know what? I need help here. Was there an event? Was there something that made you said, you know what? Okay, this I've got to come to grips that this program isn't working.
Yeah, you know, it's actually, I've been very fortunate that I can juggle a lot of things all at once in my life. And, you know, I've always gone home to see my family every other weekend, regardless of where I lived in the country, frankly. And there came a point where I remember like actually like very clearly, it was right in the back of my mind. You're like, something's off, but I can't really figure out what it was. I was actually, I love reading, right? I read all the time. I was reading a book, and I kept on going through a chapter, and I knew it was really valuable, but I couldn't put the pieces together, right? Like they just couldn't come together, and I knew the idea was exciting. And like when you get excited about an idea, like it just gives you a rush through your entire body. Mm-hmm. And I remember I couldn't figure out how all the concepts related and how I could draw it to I would say other subject matter that would have made it even more juicy. And then on top of it too, I was supposed to go see my family that weekend. And I remember I was supposed to take my girl out to dinner the night before. And I told her I can't do it because I don't have enough energy. And all of a sudden it was like, you're that guy. Like something is wrong. Like, shoot, you actually slept in every day over the past week. Like that's not like you either. And it was like, at that point in time, I said, I got to figure it out. It just doesn't make sense. And I think that the thing that was also hard emotionally is like when my doctor told me nothing was wrong with me, it's like, here's a guy that I trust, and who's obviously a professional, and saying that it's in my head. And then I was like, no, like psychologically, I know I'm constantly journaling, doing gratitude exercises, questioning myself. I was like, I don't think it's in my head. And then, honestly, the scary thing was like, is it some form of dementia that's setting on early, right? And that's terrifying. And my father is a type 1 diabetic that's a kidney patient. I've seen him struggle with a chronic disease and be on dialysis for 20 years. And I had vowed to and God, listen, he's the most amazing guy, but I also told myself, I'm not going down that path because it's just a really hard life. And so I said, I got to figure this thing out because it would be really scary if that's really what it was. And I said, I'm going to go face it head on. And I think, like I said, it was wonderful. It was meant to happen. That's probably the best way I can describe it.
It's great. And I think those moments, those inflection points in life, the sooner that we have them and we have that transparent conversation with ourselves and our trusted professionals or the people close to us, that's friends or family members or things like that, I think the better off, because oftentimes they're acutely aware that you're off as well. You're not really hiding it as well as you might think. And I think that's the piece where opportunity hits, in that we can, as men in society today, because the roles have changed, the world's changed. We're in a radical proliferation of technological innovation with our old biological systems in place. And we haven't worked out many of the parameters around here, nor do we understand all of its complications biologically. But what we can say is low testosterone levels or imbalance of hormones, high estrogens, low testosterones, and the cascading interrelations between how we develop, cultivate, produce hormones, and going down to the whole cascade, because it's not just about testosterone. There's a whole other aspect to this. A lot of people just think it's testosterone, but that's the starting point, or the one that's the most common element. But there's these cofactors and co-hormones and stuff. And this is where expertise comes in. And now we have that expertise. So the question becomes, what is your suggestion? And we'll get into the tech side of things first. How do people overcome, or how do men particularly overcome, the stigma of low testosterone and what that means, or hormonal imbalances, if you want to call that? And then also maybe you have some insight into how men's partners, women, can also help initiate that conversation in a way that doesn't threaten their guy. Because I think that's, women who I know, a lot of women in this space talk about it too. My guy's not on this, he's not on, like they're suffering as well. And they don't know how to bring it up either.
So the breaking the stigma is, there are two parts of it, right? And it depends upon, or let's say there are more than two parts, but let's talk about different ages, right? And kind of like for guys that are probably 50, 55, 60, 70, I think there's a different kind of masculinity that they probably hold and identify with than someone that's in their 30 or 35 kind of age
100%.
bracket, right?
So
And I think that for the guys that are far more alpha and hyper masculine, what you have to realize is that, your body has been changing for the past 20 years. And frankly, it's literally not your fault at all. And everyone's body is different, but your body is just not producing, like you don't produce as much hair, or your skin is not as elastic as it used to be. You're just not producing as many hormones as you were when you were younger. And frankly, it's incredibly empowering to know that there's nothing wrong with you as a person. And there are ways to kind of help your body get back to where it used to be, right? And what's interesting is that, so we're not an optimization clinic, right? Guys that just want to come in and get treated, and we can even talk about in what dosages guys get treated. We are specifically, when men are hypogonadal or clinically low, below kind of a 300 nanograms per deciliter threshold, we then help. And so the guys that come and they work with us to do the at-home assessment, or they go to a LabCorp and they bring us their assessment, they're medically in a place where they actually need help. And so there's nothing to be ashamed about. If anything, you should be really proud that you're taking a step in a direction to help make yourself even better for you, for your family, right? For younger guys, there's a completely different stigma, because it's almost unfathomable to believe that at 35 years old that you have low testosterone, and it's almost, it's on one hand, it's a lot scarier. On the other hand, I think that if you're 35 years old, you almost have a different kinds of acceptance, in the sense that you've kind of been like, you've been part of like this digital age where you see a lot of stuff on your phone. It's okay to talk about your feelings a little bit more. There are lots of innovative companies that are offering services to kind of like help you break through that wall. And so you're just a little bit more open and willing to do those things. And so I think that the stigma there, though, is understanding your body may be changing, but not because your body is actually your hormone, or I'm gonna say your body needs an adjustment. That's probably the best way to say it, in the sense that you may live in an environment where there are a large number of pollutants that are really kind of just have beat you down, or you're not sleeping right, or you've been eating inappropriately, right? You may be a little bit obese. And so there are things that are within your control. There are things that are outside of your control that no matter how much you try to fix, you just never will actually improve them. And so I think that men that are younger are actually, what's really interesting, the average age of a testosterone user in the country is 53. The average age of our user is 39.
Wow.
So what you're seeing happen is there is a much younger demo that knows there's something wrong with them. And I think because they've seen their parents go through chronic conditions, and they know that there's this promise of living longer, they're proactively saying, like, I want to get this addressed. Now, I do think there's a large number of guys that are not educated yet to understand that there's something that's wrong with them. And I think that is the key is to basically say, can we help men understand that in their late 30s, early 40s, their bodies just start moving a little bit differently. The environment is kind of beating them down. And for them to feel like, hey, this is just a normal thing. Like I would go get a vaccine or take a Tylenol to go get my hormones looked at. You don't have to always do anything with it. But how do I proactively say, I'm just going to make sure that I'm keeping an eye on these numbers? And I think that that's another important thing too, is within this particular science, and tell me if I'm going too deep here, Wade, because I'm going to dive into some of like, okay. All right. And here's the other thing. I have to say this. I'm not a medical professional.
Right.
And this is not medical advice.
Medical advice, legal advice. We're not telling you to go do anything. We're doing all that legal mumbo jumbo stuff that we have to do to protect yourself. Ask your physician.
God bless you. Thank you so much. So in the world of testosterone, there is a reference range, and that reference range is 900 to 300 nanograms per deciliter. So if you are anywhere within that reference range, your testosterone is okay. The reality is that that is based upon a normal distribution, and it's the bell curve, and it doesn't take into account there are people on both ends. And I'll use me as an example, and I'll use another gentleman I know as an example. When I went to get my testosterone tested at the age of 35, I was at 181. And the lab that my physician used had a reference range that was 180 to 780. And he said, well, you're in the range. There's nothing wrong with you. Another doctor took a look at it and said, I mean, Saad, you should clearly be at like 600 or 700 nanograms per deciliter at your age, looking at the health that you're in. We didn't know where I was before because I never had a measurement before. And so it was interesting as I went on first a medication called HCG, and then I tried Clomid to help bring my natural levels up. And then eventually I used testosterone. An athlete doing kind of like anabolic steroids or a bodybuilder may do 1,000 to 1,500 milligrams of testosterone per week.
Yeah.
I do 20 milligrams.
Yes.
20, right? And some guys will need to do 100, but it doesn't go up too much higher than that realistically. And so what's interesting too is I went from 181 and then I went to about 400. And then my doctor's like, oh, you can be more optimized. You can be better than that. Like 400 is still low. I went up to 800. Honestly, I hated the way I felt at 800. And so what I've realized is actually my sweet spot is 450, right? Like that's just where I am.
This is something I want to talk about because virtually all my friends who go through testosterone replacement therapy report, first off, there is an adjustment phase as you go through that initial stages, that there's kind of like an increased level of drive and aggression, and you kind of have to reframe the short response mechanisms, and that can take maybe 6 months to kind of, and can you talk a little bit about okay, so we've got through the stigma, you go through your testing, and now you're trying to find your optimal level for what you want.
The Bioptimizer mission is to help more of the world fix their digestion at a core level. The truth is, your digestion is only as good as your enzyme levels. Imagine trying to build a house with a tree. It's impossible. You need to chop the tree down into small pieces. Similarly, in order for your food to be used by your body, it must be broken down into a bioavailable form. And that's what enzymes do, converting protein into amino acids, fats into specific fatty acids, and carbohydrates into usable energy units. We start out with an abundance of enzymes, and that's why kids can digest just about anything really quickly. The thing is cooking food kills enzymes, as they cannot survive at temperatures above 118 degrees. So years of this ends up depleting our bodies and leads to weak digestion. Taking digestive enzymes like masszymes, which has an incredibly high level of protease for digesting protein, as well as other critical enzymes like lipase, amylase, and others, is a total game changer. Suddenly, you strengthen your digestion, eliminate gas and bloating, boost metabolism, and multiply your energy. Most importantly, you fix your digestion at a core level. To get started with Masszymes and to save 10% on your first order, go to masszymes.com. That's masszymes.com, and use the code MASS10, MASS10.
Yes. So this is the most important thing. It is personal. And what I mean by it's personal is even when we do an assessment, we take a look at, or I should say, the physicians that we work with, they take a look at your raw numbers, and then they ask you a bunch of qualitative questions that help us determine how you're feeling. Mm-hmm. And frankly, if your numbers are low, but you're feeling great, there's not a problem.
Right.
If your numbers are low and you feel horrible, there is a real problem. And so you said it perfectly, is that once you start taking it, there's this period where you have to get dialed in, right? And that's one of the things that we make sure we do, is we work with patients every 90 days to continuously think about how are their blood parameters changing, but more importantly, how are they feeling? And so at different amounts of testosterone and the way your body metabolizes it, your different parts of your personality are accentuated. And so you have to really think very hard about, did I like that version of myself? And keep in mind, right? So much of it is, you said it really well. Let's say that your physician provided you with a slightly higher dose, and 1 week you're uber aggressive, and maybe you said something stupid. That could be a function of you learning how to not say something dumb. So that is a very deliberate response to say, I know I need to chill out. Or you may just be so aggressive that you can't control it, and you actually don't want to be that way. And so you have to think about which versions of yourself you actually want to be. And so that's where it makes a lot of sense having a physician you can consistently work with that's very experienced with this, that can help you understand which parts of your personality you want to dial up and down. And so I'll tell you, this is probably the most interesting thing. When I started this company, I ended up spending 175 hours with about 150 men. And I sat down with them and I basically asked them about their life, longevity, their health. And 35% of the men, the way that they turned their life around is that they were in the worst place of their life. Meaning, like, they basically said, hey, look, came out of college, felt like $1 million, 30 years old, got married, had 2 kids, work responsibilities went up, started making more money. All of a sudden, life got really heavy. And then by the time I was 40, I also gained 30 pounds and I was in the worst place of my life. I didn't know who I was. And it was those men that are in kind of like the bottom in this pit, and they'd almost like liken it to a grave. they'd say, I can either, this was so interesting. I remember hearing it consistently. I could have either like literally just turned over and like gotten worse and kind of gone the path of resignation. Or I could say, I know something's wrong, be very honest with myself and change my mindset first, and then start figuring out what are the different behaviors I have to incorporate, what are the medications I may need to incorporate, what are the lifestyle choices I need to incorporate, and they slowly pull themselves out. And so I think what's interesting to note is, right, the guys that come to us are very often the guys that are in that hole. And so their families are suffering, they're suffering. And so the moment that they start to see some symptom relief, there's this new momentum in their life. And the momentum, it's so important that you work with like a professional to figure out, what do you do with that momentum, right? Like, where are you putting that new energy? Are you just running around with your shirt off and trying to go to the gym and like do more push-ups? No, like you're working on yourself. And so it's really important that as you get on the medication and you start to feel these new changes coming about and you start to see parts of your mind waking up again, all of a sudden you're saying like, who is it that I want to be? And how do I take that momentum and harness it? And so many people think it's the testosterone. It's not the testosterone, right? It's the testosterone gives you the single biggest insight I've gained from running this company is that it's not muscle, it's not libido, although like the libido and the muscle give you more confidence. Guys just want energy to feel like themselves again so they can just get back to it, right? And it's like the easiest, calmest thing at the end of the day that they're chasing after.
My coach, who was my bodybuilding coach, who I rehired recently, we had a long hiatus after my career, and just hired him recently because I'm getting ready 50 weeks to 50. So I said, hey, I need to
Amazing.
The icon I was when I was competing in Mr. Universe contests. He has a great video on that, on testosterone replacement, when to use it, what's the difference between that and the use of that as testosterone, as you referred to as like anabolic steroid use, which is completely different. And that was the word, the phrase specifically, I just want to feel like myself again.
Yes.
That is the most common, I don't feel like myself is the common descriptor. And then when people have got that optimized, I do feel like myself is the common description afterwards. And then how you define that and where you channel that energy is going to vary from person to person. Walk me through your company, Hone Health, and how, you know, you went through your own transformation, got this sort of thing. Obviously, you probably, you know, being the type of person you have, my guess is that you saw there were some flaws within the model that was going, that you thought that you could say, hey, you know what? If this was delivered to people in a smooth, effective, easily accessible way that didn't create all the friction points that you went through, there might be an opportunity here to be of great service to mankind. Is that an accurate statement? And if it is,
that's exactly the statement.
Can you kind of go down that route and describe what Hone Health is, what they offer, and what makes them unique relative to other companies or offerings in the space?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me maybe even describe the problem a little bit more. Like,
Please.
I think you heard me talk about went to my primary care physician. That's me taking time to go out there, drive, made me get my blood tested somewhere else, had to go somewhere else, had to go back to my primary care physician, spent 6 months because I was determined, seeing different specialists, finally met someone. And then after I met them, I mean, they're wonderful. Went on an oral medication, and then eventually moved to a combination of an oral medication plus TRT. And I had to go into the office every week, right?
Was that an injectable or a gel?
A gel. I'm sorry, an injectable. And so it was an incredible amount of time that I had to spend. It was a lot of money that I had to spend. And
what type
what
type of cost are you talking about for that whole process? There's a time cost, 6 months, and all that lost opportunity cost, all the friction, if you will.
I mean, right. So like Luckily, I've got really good health insurance, but even with the health insurance, driving different places, parking different places, like I live in New York City, parking is not cheap sometimes, right?
They're not cheap, criminally insane. I
And
think.
like I had to take a subway a bunch of places, but like sometimes I had to leave the city. Like it's just, I mean, I probably spent, I don't know, $1,000, $1,200 just running around doing different blood tests that weren't necessarily covered. Like it wasn't cheap. But I'll tell you, I think what we basically, the conclusion we've come to is that people would pay the money if they got the time back, right? Like,
Yeah, you can't get the time back.
I can't get the time. And right, I don't have children yet. Imagine if I had 2 kids, right? Like, that's just really difficult to do. And luckily, I work for myself, so I can kind of make my own schedule. I mean, if I had to work for someone, that's really hard. And like, what do you tell someone? And do you want to admit it? I don't want to admit it. And so we basically I came to the conclusion of, and I think the entire process felt so sterile. Like no one really cared. They weren't coordinating care. Also too, like at the end of the day, the option of going to like a true TRT clinic was kind of felt, I hate to say it felt dirty. And it was just super time consuming, right? Like it's just, it doesn't feel like they have my best interest at heart necessarily. And so what our company does is we send an at-home assessment to you. And that at-home assessment essentially is a set of Lancets that you prick your finger with, and you provide us with some blood on basically a fancy piece of filter paper. You then take that fancy piece of filter paper, you drop it in the mail, and you mail it to one of our CLIA and CAPT accredited labs. So basically, they've done a bunch of testing to make sure they can verify that the blood that goes on that fancy piece of filter paper is equivalent to venous puncture. Mm-hmm. We then analyze it for 8 different hormones, and then we basically send you a text once it's all done, and we hook you up with an affiliated physician, and the physician does a 30-minute telehealth consult with you where it's an audio-visual consult, right? None of that asynchronous text stuff that some of the other larger kind of telehealth companies do. Like this is a personal conversation between 2 people where we need you to be vulnerable, right? And what the physicians do is they ask you questions about like, who do you want to be? Why are you really doing this? And then they educate you on what your hormones and your biomarkers mean, right? Because it's not just a, hey, this is what your levels are, you should do this. It is a collaborative process where you're having a conversation with a physician, understanding what's happening in your body. And then more importantly, the physician is saying, you've got some options, right? You've got these, you maybe have a natural option, maybe you have and then here are a couple other options. It is not just, you should do this. And they go over the benefits and the side effects, and they're very, very clear about things, right? And then at the end of the day, right, and this is the wonderful thing, is those physicians, they will never get compensated based upon their prescribing. They only get compensated just for seeing you. So the moment they click that camera, we pay them. So it means they don't have an incentive to sell you a medication. And so basically, you make a decision. Is it something you want to do? Is it something you don't want to do? If it's something that you do want to do, we basically help coordinate the entire kind of like getting medications experience too. So you literally click a button on our website, you drop a credit card in. If it is a non-controlled substance that a physician is prescribing to you, we then have the non-controlled substance sent directly out to your house. If it is a controlled substance, because we are the most conservative clinic out there, because it's incredibly important for us to make sure that we were doing the safest thing by our patients. We do a confirmatory test just to make sure it literally is not going to cause any problems for you. We send you the medication. You have complete access to our customer service team and to your physician. But then more importantly, we don't just sell a medication and leave you alone. We literally say every 90 days, if you want to continue getting this medication, you have to do another at-home assessment. You have to talk to a physician every 90 days. And we require patients to do that because it's really important to have someone to bounce off. How are you feeling? Is this medication not working really well for me? Should I add a different medication in? Should I actually titrate down a little bit? And that's what becomes like really at the end of the day, it's the relationship that we're servicing for the patient. And I think the other really interesting thing is you're going to see we start introducing a lot of new medications, other therapeutic categories. But the thing that I'm really excited about, because no other company has decided to be brave enough to do it because they're afraid of what it could mean. But basically, very often when most guys go to physicians or they go talk to someone about TRT, what's the first thing they do in order to go look for information?
Go online.
Go online. And you probably end up in like some seedy forum where it's a bunch of bro science and it's a bunch of like LOLs and like a bunch of really well-intentioned people, but they don't necessarily, you don't know if it's quality information, right?
And
so
and again, even in the best situation, it's only offering generalizations, which may have no biological implication or relevancy for your personal situation because of the variance across a subset of populations. And like there's only one you, one lifestyle that you're living, one genetic history, one hormonal health profile, which is subject to a lot of variables that only a professional is going to be able to pick apart to get the leverage that you need in order to get dialed in. And this is what biohacking actually is.
yes.
Biohacking isn't taking a bunch of generalizations from some peer-reviewed journal and applying it carte blanche that is sold on a nebulous website from a foreign country that's sending in some, whatever thing in that makes you feel great and has who knows what kind of negative side effects or contaminants. Biohacking is about selecting the expertise that is able to initiate the proper quantitative and qualitative procedures and testing so that you can make educated, informed decisions based on the N of one, the only thing that ever counts.
Yep.
In the decision. And then you made another piece I think is important. You're continually tracking as the process of time goes by, because we are not static beings. You can't just say, hey, you know what? I solved this. I'm taking my 20 milligrams a day. I'm good for the next 20 years. And 8 months a year, 16 months down the road, 2 years down the road, you're not getting the results. Well, again, you went back to the problem that got you into the situation in the first place, the lack of monitoring by qualitative and quantitative expertise.
Yep. And it's so important that you say that. I'm going to go back to it, the N of one. You are so incredibly different. And the other thing that's important to realize, a lot of stuff you read in that boards, what works for someone else could very well work for you, right? And I would say, like, I am a obsessive collector of different bio optimizations, and I have a stack that's super personal to myself. And I've only learned what that stack is because I've tried a lot of different things and qualitatively and quantitatively assess them, right? And I'm sure you have as well too. And I think that a lot of those boards, they've served an incredibly prolific purpose in helping people get information in a very unfiltered fashion. But you also have to have the skill set of understanding how to filter through that fashion. Yeah. And so one of the things that we're doing is we're basically saying, how can we take the conversations happening on that board and have them directly on our site, where you're talking to not only team members that we have that can give you information, but we have vetted our own kind of community members that have been through therapy, that are very well attuned to never providing medical advice, but helping you think through your own personal journey, and also including our physicians on it, right? And so other people won't do it because they're saying, hey, look, it could potentially bring the war to your house. And we're going, no, look, it is our duty to make sure that those conversations are had and that we are providing people with facts. And it is our duty to make sure that they're getting the truth in a lot of circumstances. And so that's one of the things I'm really excited about. And it's right, it's not a TRT community, it's a how do you be a better man community more than anything.
Love it. I think that's a great service and something I think is well positioned and of vital importance in society today. There's a lot of extraneous stress going on, major shifts in the last 18 months, if you will, based on the pandemic. I think it's been disastrous for men's health. If you look at the composite data, the average weight gain has been 30 pounds.
Yes.
It has been most impactful for the lower range of the economic status. That's all been now proven. Harvard just came out with a study on that. The comorbidities relative to the pandemic issues are real, and overweight and obesity, which are correlated with low testosterone levels, high anxiety levels and depression, excessive cortisol levels are all suppressing agents that are on that. And right now, and then of course, the loss of identity through impact to financial constraints, rising debt loads, maybe aspects of providing for one's health, and the identity issues that kind of compound, that can trigger a cascade of devastating hormonal and psychological components. If there ever was a time for men in this country to kind of, you know what, say, hey, the circumstances require a radical intervention within my own self and my own operational parameters to adapt. And the sign of an evolutionary being, someone who's dialed in and ready to take charge, throughout history, what's separated us from other species on the planet is our ability to assess the emerging situation and adapt to it through the cultivation of community and technology.
Mm-hmm.
That's what makes us human. And I think, if I heard you correctly, what you're providing is you're providing an extraordinary blend of human interaction with technological wherewithal to deliver a very convenient service to men so that they can get in a conversation, get down to the brass tacks of what's going on in their life, and to alleviate the both psychological and physiological challenges that low testosterone creates, and how to get out of it and go back out there, because we need men to step up right now. We need guys to take charge in their life. We need them to have these conversations and to let go of the stigma and go out there and win back their life and win back our society. And I think this is a pretty exciting time. So maybe you can kind of talk about where people can find about your company. How do they get access to it? What's the process? Where do we get started? How do we get going on it? All those sort of things. If you can unload for our listeners who are sitting there going, just give me the site. Where do I go? How do I, I need to go now. Where is it available? How can you get it? All that sort of stuff.
Well, wait. I have to take a second to like applaud that the narrative you just put together on the spot. That was absolutely amazing. And it couldn't have been more spot on about, if there's ever a time, now is the time, right? And it's so much deeper than kind of like my company and I'll call it like telehealth. It really is like coming together with community and helping each other be better. And like, that really is what it comes down to at the end of the day. Our small part that we're trying to do, you can find us at Hone Health. It's HONE health.com. The process, I'd like to say, is pretty simple. You can buy an at-home assessment. It costs $45. That includes not only the hormone analysis, plus it includes a physician consult. You know, if you had to go do those things by yourself, like it's
that's like a Starbucks coffee and a scone for you and your.
And so it's basically what you do to get started. And then, you know, once you have a physician consultation, there's like a baseline level membership. It's $120 per month. That includes your physician consultations. That includes all your blood testing. It includes 2-day shipping. It includes access to customer service. It includes access to your physician again. And then basically the most interesting thing is, a lot of other, I would say, like companies out there, they mark up their medications. We actually literally pass on the cost of the medication from exactly what we pay from the pharmacy directly to the patient.
Wow.
And I think that is like one of the keys is, and we're incredibly transparent on it about it. Like, we want you only paying for your meds what you basically pay. And so that's basically the way the business operates. You can find me. I'm on Instagram at Saad Alam. You can email me yourself. It's salam, SALAM at honehealth.com. And then you can also find me on Twitter at Saad, SAAD_hone as well too. And honestly, like if you have a question, just feel free to email me at any point, and I'm more than happy to help out.
Saad, this has been an extraordinary conversation. I think you're doing great work in the world, and I wish you and your company, Hone Health, the best of success. I think you're providing a very timely, service to men who are struggling to kind of get to where they need to be, where they know they should be, where they want to be, and more importantly, helping us smash through the stigmas. You got a great story, a great company, and I think that your expansion will continue to grow exponentially. And, one of the values of that is, and I know this as a business owner myself, is I always see growth, not necessarily as the dollars in the bank account, because I prefer to redeploy it to continue the mission. And you talked earlier about the mission-driven component of your company when we were offline. And I love that because we're the same way. But it's success or income or relative influence is only valuable in the sense that it's the amount of people's lives which you're impacting. And I think you're impacting people in a really positive way. And I salute you and commend you and wish you the best of success in all your endeavors. So thanks for being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much, Wade. This has been honestly like one of the highlights of my month, frankly. Like this has been incredibly exciting. And you are an absolute, God, I wish more people got to hear you. Like it makes me mad that more people don't get to hear you. And we got to figure out how to get you out there to as many people as possible, because you're incredibly eloquent. And I think that you have so much to say. So I really appreciate you as well too, man.
Well, thanks for all the kudos. I'm not sure if they're all valid, but hey, you know what? I'll take them today. Pump up my own testosterone and my self-evaluation just a little bit higher. And I hope you guys enjoyed this too. Hey, get over the stigma, guys. Get out there. If it's girls listening today, you know what? Talk to your husband, your partner, your boyfriend, and say, hey, look, you know what? This is a conversation we need to have. This is a conversation that we're going to have because I care, because I love you, and I want the best for you. And it's time that we get into that conversation sooner as opposed to later. Hone Health is an opportunity for you to take advantage of. Check out the website, check out his links, check out the social media. Get integrated and get involved. $45, you get a test. Can't beat that. I've never heard of anywhere, any place, at any time at that kind of value with a physician consultation. That's insanely great value. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. And more importantly, I hope that you take action in your life. If you're not feeling your best, you want to go strike out on your own, recapture the essence of masculinity, and go out and crush your dreams, change the world. I'm Wade Lightheart from the Awesome Health Podcast. I want to thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip. Turn cultured foods into superfoods. Raw fermented foods like sauerkraut and low sugar live yogurt can be good for you, but rarely have enough of the right probiotic strains for therapeutic benefit. So here's a way that you can turn them into superfoods. What I do is I get some raw sauerkraut or a healthy yogurt. Ideally, it's grass-fed or coconut-based, and you can empty 3 caps of P3OM into a container and mix it up thoroughly. Leave it at room temperature for a couple of hours before putting it back into the fridge. And what's going to happen is these probiotic levels will be multiplied. In fact, it doubles every 20 minutes. And then what you're going to get is you're going to have a food with strong proteolytic activity. To learn more about P3OM and why its patented strains make it the strongest probiotic available, go to www.bioptimizers.com.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.